Many years ago, I was settling in at the office in the morning and the phone rang. Now, that phone call started a 1 year journey, and I remember like it was yesterday, but I'm changing the details to maintain autonomy. The man on the phone said he got my name from a previous client of mine who I had helped buy and sell a few homes. He was looking to sell and downsize to another home in a more convenient location. He asked me to stop by to look at the house. He was pretty reserved, and I didn't get much more for details. So I got his address, scheduled the appointment, and I did my homework. There wasn't much in public records, so there was a lot of unknowns before I got to the property. On the day of the appointment, I drove up to the house. Whew. The exterior and landscaping needed attention, and the overall house looked like it needed some TLC. It had a lot of deferred maintenance. So I got out of my car and walked up to the front entrance and rang the doorbell. I met this soft spoken man and was welcomed in. We finally settled in at the kitchen table, and he continued to tell me this home was a longtime family home. Then he shared a personal loss over about a year ago. It happened, and my heart just sunk. He had a family and wanted to move to a smaller home in a location that fit daily routines better. So we started the tour, and honestly, it was overwhelming. We went through the house, room after room, and every room was pretty full. It looked like nothing had been touched. Some rooms felt paused in time. I was completely silent and just let him share whatever he wanted to share. He went on saying he had started to declutter and had given some stuff to family, but admitted he was stuck and he didn't know where to start. This was nothing I had ever experienced before. I was a newer agent at the time. And that's when I realized this wasn't a property that would be ready to sell in a couple of months. There were so many obstacles: the emotional, the physical, the logistical. I was so overwhelmed, and I couldn't even imagine what he could possibly be feeling. Now, typically, after I do a tour, I sit down with the sellers and we talk about the game plan. Their timelines, my recommendations on issues to address to optimize the sale of the home, and, how I would market the property to squeeze every nickel out of, for profit for them. But I was completely at a loss for words. I felt deflated and heartbroken for the family. I thanked him for his time and I told him I would be in touch. Honestly, I left dazed and confused as I got into my car. So I drove down a mile down the road and pulled over at a little private spot. And honestly, I just broke down in tears. That experience was like no other. It was so sad. And I knew this man was stuck, and he had so many obstacles to overcome. The next day, I went into the office with fresh eyes. I sat down and put together a plan because I realized this is more than just selling and listing a home. This man needed an army to get him where he needed to be, and I was going to do whatever it took to get him there. And I knew this was going to be a learning process for me too. I started writing down people and resources, anyone I knew, anyone I could trust. A colleague told me about someone who helped people sort out their belongings and declutter. I knew contractors that did good work and were fair on prices. I also worked with, good painters and professional house cleaners on previous listings. I went in all fronts to give him options. The following week, I met with him again, and this time with robust options and game plans. The first question every seller asks is, what's my house worth? Fair enough. So I gave him a price range based on comparable properties that recently sold. Now, this range was specific to what he could realistically tackle up front to prepare the house for sale. There are 5 kinds of conditions for houses, but I gave him 2 clear options with different price points. Option 1 was full preparations before listing. He would need to paint the interior of the whole house, not just one room, because it really needed it. Also, the exterior needed repairs to the siding. The damage was really apparent. The hardwood floors also needed to be refinished because they were worn down over the years. It really looked bad. And I told him straight up, don't just do 1 or 2 things. If you paint one room but leave the floors in the current state, buyers are still going to see the house as distressed. And if you paint one room next to one that isn't painted, boy, that difference is going to be even more glaring. So the effort is either all in or we leave it as is. Anything in between would just be a waste of time and money, and he wouldn't get that money back. Okay, so option one was to list it move in ready. And this was to address deferred maintenance, freshly paint the interior because it really needed it, and turbo clean top to bottom. And we could price it at the high end of the range. The bathrooms and the kitchen, they were dated, but they were in good shape and certainly not worth the investment in this scenario. The house would show move in ready with potential for buyers to make it their own. Option two was to list it as is. He'd just handle the essential repairs and safety items that would show up on an inspection report. He'd also clear out all the clutter, and we price it at the low end of the range. In this scenario, buyers would take on all the work, but the house wouldn't be appealing and it may take longer to sell. So I gave him the time he needed to think it over. A couple weeks later, we reconnected. Wow, he had gotten estimates for the repairs and painting, and he decided to go with option one. He said he had the energy to do this and wanted to get the best price for the home. So we ironed out the timeline for the work to be done. The work could be done while the process of clearing out the house was happening. And was gonna be a major overhaul all in itself that would take time. Lots and lots of time. But that was okay. It was a process. So we had our game plan, and I booked the decluttering specialist. She worked with him on a regular basis, going in there and taking care of things room by room and item by item. He's a busy guy, so she was able to take the items of value and put them on a local selling platform. He would make decisions on what to donate, and they really started clearing things out. It was a very systematic approach, but it wasn't happening overnight. And there were certain things that just had to be left aside while he was still processing how to handle certain belongings. But this specialist was a professional, and she handled the psychological challenges he'd faced. But in the meantime, we were multitasking. While the inside was being cleared out, the exterior work was happening and ongoing. Progress was going on. I could see my client building momentum, and the process of decluttering to move to a smaller space was becoming less painful. The specialist said it becomes a natural progression the more you do it. That makes sense, right? Okay, months and months later, the repairs had been made and the house was looking emptier, spacious, and more open. And this is when I called my home stager. I provide a stager, for initial consultations as part of my service, and she offers recommendations for what to keep in the house, how the existing furniture should be placed, what wall color to use. Basically, anything that makes the spaces look great, any kind of recommendations. When she came in, she immediately reinforced the power of intense cleaning. So I got a professional cleaning crew scheduled ASAP. We needed to have it done before the painters came in anyways to clean all the baseboards and the walls, etc. She made extensive edits to remove even more stuff from the home. And she also recommended replacing some dated lighting fixtures with reasonable ones to modernize the space. It wasn't nothing crazy, just a better fit at a low cost. So off he went to clear the house out even more, and the painters got to work. About 2 weeks later, the house looked stunning. Boy, I can't say this enough. Fresh paint is such a miracle worker. It's so impactful. All right, so when that was done, it was time for the hardwood floors to be refinished. And again, the house was transformed even more, and there was a great sense of energy in that space. We were all so excited, and he couldn't wait to show the stager. At this point, it was almost a year of hard work and emotional challenges. None of this was easy, but there was no other choice if he wanted to move on. I was so proud of him for not giving up and pressing on. Even when was fed up, I would get calls he was fed up with the decluttering pro nagging him on a regular basis. But we were nearing the end, and he was doing it. He was making it happen. The next week, the stager rolled in with a team, and they came in like a hurricane and completely transformed the house in 3 hours. That transformation was beyond belief, and it finally represented a high end price point. I had my listing photographer come in, and the house photographed beautifully. The rooms looked spacious, the refinished floors gleamed like ice, and the fresh paint made all the difference. Also, his own furniture, properly placed, worked nicely to show purpose in every room. We listed the home and it sold nicely in line with the market at the time. And we found a better suited home in a location that was perfect for the family. So, this whole process took a little over a year from that first phone call to closing on the home. It was an epic journey from what I walked into to getting him exactly where he needed to be. It wasn't easy. What I had learned is when folks have lived in a property for decades and want to sell, they need support and guidance. Full stop. Listing a home is not just selling that home, and downsizing takes all different shapes and sizes. This gentleman was not a mature individual looking to get into easier living, looking for primary bedroom on the main floor and all the things that particular client is looking for. So it takes all different shapes. But what I had learned back then is that I really enjoyed helping clients get to where they need to be. And I became a real estate agent who is an exclusive downsizing specialist who knows the nuances and the needs that are required for that type of transition. That one call that I answered years ago changed my real estate business forever. I build relationships with trusted folks that I can call on when my clients need specific assistance. I learned about emotional aspects we all experience during this process. It's not easy. There's an element of compassion and understanding that goes along with selling a home. It's not always just wheeling and dealing like most people think with real estate agents. So I'm sharing this story with hopes that if you're downsizing and you feel overwhelmed and struggling, you'll see you're certainly not alone. Everyone who is downsizing experiences these type of pain points in varying degrees. There are a lot of obstacles. You have emotional ones, physical ones, logistical ones, but it can be done with compassion, a plan, strength, and support. I'm going to keep sharing what I've learned with hopes that it helps you. This story that I've told is a composite drawn of many experiences, and identifying details have been changed. Client confidentiality is extremely important. Here's another video you may find useful in your own downsizing journey. I'm Michael Hitz, downsizing specialist in Richmond, Virginia. Knowledge equals confidence, and I want that for you.